The state is the father of children. Thus spoke the ruthless architect of America's public school system, Horace Mann, in his quest to replace God with government, the Bible with Darwin, and homeschooling with bureaucrats. Nearly 2 centuries on, that system has failed our children, and parents are rebelling. I'm Hayden Ludwig. America's first schools were founded by faithful Calvinists who taught their children scripture, history, and ethics. Their commitment forged great leaders like Patrick Henry and Samuel Adams, and eventually the American Republic itself. Then we forgot God, abandoned the Bible's clear teaching on human sin, and turned to Washington, D.C. to mold our kids. It's taken generations, but a growing movement of Christian homeschoolers is restoring that old wisdom from our colonial forefathers, while an unlikely hero, President Donald Trump, has done the unthinkable: slay the Department of Education, we hope for good. We're joined today by Victoria Manning, a former Virginia Beach School Board member and senior investigative researcher for Restoration News, who literally wrote the book on the Education Department's corruption. Vicki, glad to have you on Restoration Spotlight.
Thanks. It's great to be with you, Hayden.
One of President Trump's greatest accomplishments undoubtedly will be rolling back the big government takeover of education. Back in January, he cut DEI and critical race theory. A couple months later, in March, he axed a huge part of the Department of Education. So far, as of recording, how would you rank his success in rolling back federal takeover of education?
I think he's been doing an astounding job. He made a great decision by hiring Secretary Linda McMahon. And I had the opportunity to meet with her and her staff up at the Education Department a couple of months ago. And one of the things that their department is really focusing on is trying to get rid of the bureaucracy in education. Right now, the federal government funds public schools with just a small amount of their total funding through grants. And those grants come with a lot of stipulation and reporting requirements.
Go figure.
And so those reporting requirements oftentimes don't even apply to the reason for the grant. So that's one of the things that they want to abolish. Those grants come with a lot of administrative overhead that local school districts have to fund. So, once you add bureaucracy, you can't take it away.
Well, a huge aspect of this, of course, is removing DEI, right? Which, of course, is just discrimination going back to the 1960s.
Absolutely. And I have seen at the local level that school districts across the nation have removed their DEI departments. They've removed the discrimination that has been taking place over the last decade in public schools. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits discrimination. So President Trump and Secretary McMahon just want to enforce the law. And that's what that directive is about, the removal of the DEI programs.
Now, many people would be surprised watching that the Education Department really isn't that old. It only goes back to Jimmy Carter in the late 1970s, right? Since that time, Vicki, what has been the effect on America's public school system?
Absolutely. Well, when they first created the Education Department, it was not a cabinet-level department. Legislators were very concerned that this department would become too big and that the government would start assuming the role of parents. And that's what's happened. That is what has happened. And they're turning our schools into social services organizations rather than focusing on academics. What we see now in our schools, kids are showing up and they're eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner at school.
No mom and dad.
No mom and dad. They're getting healthcare services. They have organizations called community schools coming into schools doing after-school care for children. So not only are they there for the full school day, they're there after school as well, helping the children with their homework. They are assuming the role of the parent. And that is a huge issue. And I think that the elimination of some of these regulations and oversight at the Department of Education is really going to help bring back that parent role. One thing that I hear a lot in school board meetings sometimes is we want to partner with parents.
Oof, I don't.
Exactly. The government should never be a partner with parents. And that's something that we really need to focus on. Parents need to realize that they have a natural right to provide the oversight for their children's education.
You're an advocate for education freedom. Let's touch on one of the most enduring myths that we hear from teachers' unions and their Democrat allies, and that is that education freedom laws, such as you support, would strip all of these schools of crucial federal tax dollars, starve special ed programs. Vicki, is that even remotely true?
Absolutely not. So first of all, school districts get only a very small percentage of their funding from the federal government. They get a lot of their funding they get most of their funding from state and local taxes. And, teachers' unions want to focus on what is best for government schools. Well, what we should be focusing on is what's best for the student. And we've really gotten away from that. So true education freedom allows tax dollars to follow the child. And that way parents can make the best decision for their own individual child. For example, a parent who has a child with special needs who may not be getting the services that they need in their public school, if they had education freedom where tax dollars follow the child, then they can get those support services that they need for their own child and really cater their education to the needs of the child.
And that would include public schools, but also private, charter, homeschooling.
Exactly. They would have a lot of different options in some states. In some states that have good education freedom laws, they even allow those state tax dollars to go toward things like occupational therapy or speech therapy for children with special needs that may not be offered and available in a government-run school.
Now, speaking of education freedom, you run a project published by Restoration News called restoringedu.com. This is a list of all 50 states in the District of Columbia, powered by your research, that ranks all of these states' laws from A to F. The fascinating thing about this, I think, is it's not a red state, blue state paradigm like we often see. Of course, the blue states are all failing, but many red states have Ds and Fs, or at the best, Cs.
We don't have true education freedom in this nation in many states. Some states claim that they have universal school choice, where tax dollars follow the student. However, the problem becomes the funding isn't there. Only a small percentage of children in that state, for example, 5%, can actually take advantage of those true education freedom laws that will allow them the actual choice. You also have charter schools that parents can choose in some states, but they're still run by the local school boards or overseen by the state. So
not as independent as we think.
Not as independent. You still have government intervention and oversight, not true education freedom. So we need to push to expand state tax dollars following the student. And, going back to that question that you asked me earlier about, does education freedom harm the local schools? Well, what's interesting is in true education freedom that it's typically the state tax dollars that follow the student. The local tax dollars, if you pull your child out of that school, those local tax dollars stay with the school. And this is about what is best for the child. Teachers' unions and the Democrats push what is best for the government schools, not what's best for the child. And we need to get back to a focus on academics and focus on teaching children reading and math and not creating social justice warriors as is what is happening in our government-run schools now.
And, speaking of creating social justice warriors, one of the biggest revolutions of our time, I think, is the growth in very much Christian-led homeschooling. Though, of course, many of them are not Christians, right? But since 2020, millions of families have pulled their children out of the public government-run schools. And I think the long-term effect of this is a generation of young students who are inured to the teachers' unions and their queer Marxist theories, right? What do you think is the long-term consequence of this?
Well, I think people, even non-Christians, are opening their eyes to how government-run schools are failing. In my school district in Virginia Beach, during COVID, 3,000 students left the school when they went to virtual schooling and children couldn't be in person. And when the schools reopened, those children did not return.
Wow.
So parents are realizing that there are other options out there. And there's so much flexibility in schooling now. You have micro schools where communities are getting together and they're saying, hey, let's get together and educate our children ourselves. Churches are becoming places where families can use their space to come.
Yeah, very organic.
Very organic. And so there are a lot of online accredited homeschool programs that you can use. I used it with my own kids in middle school. Some parents, including myself, I didn't feel equipped to teach my children higher math. And so I needed something else to rely on. And so there's so many resources out there right now. So I really believe that the government-run schools in that brick box building, that is changing. And I think that people are realizing that there are other options out there. And I honestly believe that when we have more competition in our government schools, it's going to be an incentive for them to do better. Because right now they have monopoly and they don't have an incentive to do better.
No competition.
No competition.
One of the things you've stressed in your writing for Restoration News, as a former Virginia Beach School Board member, is the importance of conservatives getting involved in these local school board races. Talk to us about that.
It's so important. You know, when I first ran for school board, I was not involved in politics at all. I was a concerned parent. I was very concerned with where my child's education was heading. And so I got involved. I started writing op-eds and started attending school board meetings. And I was encouraged to run for the school board. And I truly believe I was able to make a difference. I was able to have a voice for other parents like me. And we need more passionate parents out there who are willing to step up and run for school board. You know, Colonel Alan West, who we've had on this show before, has expressed that the school board is the most important position on the ballot. And people should really be educated on who they're voting for. You can meet these people. They live in your neighborhood. Call them up, ask them to lunch, show up to a school board meeting, get to know them and what they're about. Are they there for the real reason of academics and teaching your children? Or do they want to be a partner with you and really control what your children are being taught? Rather than, you know, I say a good teacher and a good school, they look at the parent and the child as their customer. And that's not happening right now in our schools. So I think that we need to be more focused on the parent being the customer.
Vicki Manning, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Tyrants know the best way to capture a nation's soul is seizing control of their children's education, and we've got a long way to go yet in this country. I'm Hayden Ludwig, and this is Restoration Spotlight, a project of Restoration News, your source of headline-smashing investigative journalism for the America First movement. Check us out at restoration-news.com. Until next time, stay vigilant and trust in God.